I really appreciate that Leah took my kind of nutty idea to do that song today. But I'm hoping that you were listening to that song and thinking about the Serenity Prayer, because, you know, it might not be the best theological springboard to say the best you can hope for is to die in your sleep, but that song kept coming to me this week when I was thinking about the Serenity Prayer. And in 1976, a 23-year-old man, songwriter named Don Schlitz, wrote that song. His father had just passed away. He wasn't a gambler, his father wasn't either, but he had gotten some advice from his father, and that's when he wrote, "You've got to know when to hold 'em, know when to fold 'em, know when to walk away, and know when to run." Kenny Rogers' Greatest Hits was my first record album when I was a kid in the late 70s. And for a pop country song, it's actually surprisingly similar advice to the wisdom in the Serenity Prayer. Like the Serenity Prayer, the gambler is actually a call to wise discernment. Our whole Unitarian Universalist religious theology is based on wise discernment. We're not given a creed, we're not told what to think. Instead, we are tasked with a freedom to choose our sources, even if they're a Kenny Rogers song. Now, not everyone resonates with our theology because it asks us to do some work. I know one person here tells the story of having brought a neighbor to church, and they said, "Well, that was nice, but that's too much work." Our theology asks us to find sources of our faith from both traditional and non-traditional sources. We gather our theological reflections from ancient prayers and scripture, from poetry, from lived experience, from Alcoholics Anonymous literature, and from country music songs from 1978. Our faith is a free faith, and this freedom comes with a responsibility, and it also requires a sharp sense of discernment. This means that we have to decide if the smoking and drinking references in our special music are okay for worship. There's not really a playbook. It means we have to decide if the messages of that song resonate with our shared covenants, or if they at least call us to further exploration. Unitarian Universalism is also based on our caring about this world. These two things go hand in hand, because if we care about the world and we're paying attention, then we know things are a bit of a dumpster fire out there. And because there's so much trouble and strife and injustice in our world, we are best advised to cultivate some mindful discernment skills to know, like the gambler, what to throw away and what to keep. We have to be wise in our discernment about what we put our energy into, or that dumpster fire will consume us and consume our caring hearts. This is the same message that actually has come down through ancient Sanskrit texts, through Aristotle and Sophocles, and even St. Thomas Aquinas. All of those sources have been credited as the deep roots of the Serenity Prayer. But no matter where it came from, wise discernment is the heart of the Serenity Prayer, asking for the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, courage to change what we can, and that wisdom that helps us discern between what we can change and what we can't. The exact origins of the version of our modern Serenity Prayer are hard to pin down. Christian theologian and minister Reinhold Niebuhr is most often credited with having written it, but some historians have pointed out that one of his seminary students, a woman named Winifred Crane Weigel, published the prayer before he did. So, while the origins and history and evolution of this elegant and powerful little prayer are somewhat lost to history, it's currently popularly known as the Alcoholics Anonymous prayer due to its publication in AA literature starting in the late 40s. Because of AA, the Serenity Prayer has evolved into something most of us have heard in both secular and religious circles. The call for the wisdom to know the difference, to know what we have power over and what we don't, rings true for all of us sharing this human experience. It's about knowing when to hold them and when to fold them, when to walk away and when to run. Now, just like you may remember the Desiderata was hanging in my house as a child, the Serenity Prayer was just on a little piece of paper inside the cupboard, but it was also there when I was a kid. And you know, when you're a kid, you read stuff and you don't really get it. Maybe you do, maybe you don't, but do you think I took this to heart? No. All those years I grew up reading it, I didn't really absorb that bit of wisdom that instructs us of how important it is to learn to distinguish between what we can change and what we can't, and when to quit trying. I didn't really get it until years and years and years, decades later, when I realized how toxic it can be, how much of a life killer it can be to keep putting blood, sweat, and tears into losing battles. Sometimes it's better to know when to quit, to stop, step back, and refocus. Like many of us, I spent my young adult years trying to jam square pegs in round holes, perplexed as to why people would not be inspired to do what was the right thing, and thinking if I just tried harder, everything would work out. I thought that if someone I loved was unkind and difficult to get along with, I could just explain a better way to them. And if I explained it well enough, surely they would understand and change their ways. Many long evenings and all night longs went into a lot of explaining and justifying and trying. And it took me years to learn when to walk away and when to run. To learn what it means to cast one's pearls before swine. Now, no offense to pigs, because they're smart, but I promise you, my pet pig Maisie does not appreciate the finer things in life. She doesn't appreciate how I get cleaned up to come to church, and she's happy to leave a big snout mark right on my pant leg. You'll notice that now. Today, black pants, see, right? But have you ever considered that saying, don't toss your pearls before swine? It's funny, but it's actually really true. We need to value our own precious energy enough that we use wise discernment around who gets it. When we love and value ourselves, we learn to be mindful of sharing our energy and our light and our love in spaces only where we are valued. Our sincerity and our energy are a finite resource, and as we grow wiser, we realize that we are best off to avoid fighting losing battles. We're best off to avoid people who know everything and environments where people don't appreciate us. Now, sometimes, granted, we don't have a choice. Sometimes we have to do what needs to be done, to work for a boss or a corporation that uses us like a machine. Sometimes we have good reasons for staying in relationships where we are ignored or undervalued. So life isn't perfect, and we can't always have perfect purity around deciding where we invest our energy, but just to have this mindfulness of the value of ourselves is a huge step. When I was younger, if someone else didn't value me or value my contributions, I let their opinions dictate my own. But it is our sacred duty to know our value. We have not only a right, but a duty to cultivate the wisdom to know when to stop trying, to be aware of where we put our energy. We still might say what needs to be said, even if the person isn't listening. We will still stand up for what is good and right, but then we know when to leave it there. We become tuned in to discern who is truly worthy of our pearls. We who use the bleeding hearts, we tend to be the ones who care the most, the ones who work for justice or part of the people in the world. There's lots of non-UUs who care as well, but we are part of that cohort of people who work for justice in our personal lives and in the public square. We are the ones who speak up and we keep trying even when the odds are stacked against us. Last Sunday, Reverend Jeannie asked us to consider how essential it is to our lives as Unitarian Universalists and a people of faith to express our caring through compassion. While we are called to fight for justice and create a world of more inclusion and compassion, of equitable distribution of power, we each must determine what is our work and what is not. The perfect place to have to make that discernment is General Assembly. General Assembly is our Unitarian Universalist democratic decision-making conference every summer. And it's where we govern our denomination using the democratic process. It's where we share ideas and we work towards creating the future of Unitarian Universalism. So I got to go in June. And this year's session of General Assembly had an opportunity for us all to see our faith in action, to know who we are and how our caring and compassion can inspire us to stand up for what we believe in. So if any of you were tuned in, you saw that a group of young adults proposed a business resolution titled Complete Divestment from the Fossil Fuel Industry and Subsequent Reparations. Now, you may recall a visit to our sanctuary probably 2 months ago from Zoe Johnston, the daughter of our member Vanessa Johnston, and Zoe served as one of the leaders of this campaign. Columbine was a congregational sponsor of this initiative to get it put on the ballot at General Assembly. Zoe and her cohort of very passionate, caring young adults worked really, really hard to get the initiative passed at General Assembly because they believe, and many of us believe, that our denominational investments provide us a really powerful tool for change, because we're talking millions of dollars here. Ultimately, the initiative did not pass. But Zoe and her colleagues fought for their beliefs with courage, conviction, and passion. Their caring has made an impact on our denomination. UUs are now far more aware of the nature of our financial investments as an organization, and we're having conversations about divestment and reparations. So even though they weren't successful in getting the resolution passed, they were successful in educating us. And they took that risk of putting themselves out there in that brutal world of passionate controversy, especially as young adults. I'm super proud of them. I'm super proud of Zoe. And I'm so grateful for their courage and passion to live into our UU principles, because we UUs aren't perfect. And these decisions are messy, and the process is sometimes painful. Lord, grant me the courage to change the things I can. Now, passionate caring like this can be exhausting and frustrating, and there are limits to our energy for caring for others and this hurting world. But what a relief, and what a gift it is to be part of something bigger, a community of people who work for change and know that each of us doesn't have to do it all. So while the Serenity Prayer could be misused as an excuse for complacency, accepting the things we cannot change, that doesn't mean that if we can't solve climate change and we can't eradicate racism and transphobia, that we should just sit back and watch injustice and harm happen. It means that if one avenue doesn't work, we know when to quit trying that one and when to refocus on another methodology. It means that we don't chase anybody down yelling at them in an attempt to get them to listen. It means we have the wisdom to know when to switch gears, when to change tactics. The young adults calling for divestment from the fossil fuel industry by the UUA did not succeed in getting the initiative passed. So now their challenge is to care for themselves, to recharge their batteries, to acknowledge the powerful work they have done in bringing the conversation to the forefront. And then, after they've rested, it's time to figure out what's the next channel to use that precious energy for change. I saw this in action at a recent Together Colorado event. Basically, not a lot of Together Colorado's initiatives were passed in the last year. They said, you know, we didn't get most of our legislation passed this session, but we informed voters, we started conversations, and we planted the seeds of change. We built relationships with each other, we fed our souls and lived into our faith, our shared core values, and that is something to be proud of. They spent an evening together sharing a meal and praying, and most importantly, having some laughs. Now, you got to meet Vicki Wilhite, who is here, and you can see she's just a ball of joy and love, a true inspiration to me. And you also could probably hear we have like a mutual admiration society. But she has that spirit of community and inclusion and that big heart that even when the legislation doesn't get passed, the joy is still possible in having done the work together. I'm going to speak about that joy in a couple weeks because Vicki and the folks at Together Colorado have reminded me of the joy that is possible in doing the work, and that is only possible because people know when to hold them and when to fold them. They work hard, and sometimes they succeed and sometimes they don't, but they take breaks. They know they can't do the work alone, and that a bit of joy, a warm greeting, an enthusiastic consensual handshake or hug, a kind word, and good humor feeds us. They know that we can only do so much for others before we need to recharge. We can only speak so many words to someone who isn't listening or isn't able to understand, and then we rest. What a gift to be in community, how essential it is as a people of caring. May each of you remember that it is holy and right and good, that you cannot control everything and everyone. May you stay grounded in your belief that your good spirit and willingness are even more valuable than your victories. May you remember that your energy is precious, and you are called not just to the work of justice, but also to graceful acceptance of the world that is, and essential rest and peace. Blessed be, and may it be so.